change the way we think and feel about shame, and hopefully this morning we're going to get there. But talking about toxic shame, it comes from a nurturing process in which a lot of inappropriate things happen. And it works like this. The baby's uncomfortable with something that happens, and it's like, I can't remember how old my son was. We're on our way to Madeline's wedding, and my wife's wearing her finest. Ladies look their best at weddings. It's just amazing. They look better at other people's weddings than at their own. I don't know why. Just saying. But now, our little guy, for some reason, has had a volcano issue, and his volcanoes open up, top and bottom, all at the same time, on the way to the wedding. And that's the end of the wedding dress. It's just got lots of baby all over it. So now we've got to turn around and go home. And I don't know how much babies can remember. I know parents remember incidents like those because they're very embarrassing, because you keep a whole bridal party waiting. You keep a whole lot of people waiting. I remember we were in an old combi. You could only muster 35 kilometers an hour. What was the combi's name? Groenie. For some reason, some of you remember Groenie. Groenie was like a 1936 Volkswagen thing. But so we had to charge home as fast as we could with Groenie and change and then make it back to the wedding. But now, it's at that point when we're little, when we realize that, okay, I've done something wrong, but I didn't intend doing it. It's just something that happens. And then comes the inappropriate response from the people around you. All the screaming and shouting, and then the hard looks, and the anger, and the rage at you. And it's at those times when we begin to internalize toxic shame. Because what you need right then is you need, because what happens is you begin to cry, isn't that so? Because dad's screaming at mom, mom's screaming at dad, and then the both of them look at you, and one of them or both of them start screaming at you and saying whatever. And you're tiny and you are powerless because you need protection right now from what has happened to you. And it's not about what you've done to them, it's about what happened to you. You really didn't mean for that to happen, and you're working so hard at just containing your bowels, containing your tummy, keeping your food inside. That's your big job. You're working hard at just controlling everything. That's your job for the first couple of months of your life, just learning to find your handbrake and getting it to work. And lots of the time it works, but sometimes you just, I don't know, you get your timing wrong. You rip at the wrong thing and then it doesn't work. And then the whole world comes to a standstill. So, those are our first experiences with toxic shame. And it's not like you're just shamed for what you've done. It's being shamed for who you are. Because that's how you read it, and that's the words coming at you all the time. And the experience you bring out of that is an excruciating loneliness. The word is called abandonment. It's in that situation, everybody turns away and walks away from you. They're leaving you alone in that situation, just dealing with your pain. The pain of your failure, the pain of your inability. Now, with little humans, it happens hundreds of times. For the little guy, it feels like millions of times. And so, if you are at the mercy of nurturers who don't have the capacity for nurturing, who don't understand what their role is, what a mom should do in that situation is take off a dress, notice that baby's crying, and understand that this has nothing to do with baby. Baby didn't do this to me, life did this, and life happens like this. Because what are you going to do if it's Groenie, if it's the combi that spilled his oil? Or bust a tire? What do adults do? Do they get out and start kicking at the car and swearing at the car and cussing and smashing its windows? Most adults don't do that. Some I know do. But I'm talking about where our understanding and our relationship with shame comes from. And it's important that we understand that our earliest experience of shaming comes from time buried so deeply in our subconscious. But more than that, buried way deep down in the bottom of our understanding of who we are. And it leaves one feeling flawed and defective at the core of one's being. And after a while, little baby feels like I'm a mistake. Because your self-esteem is undermined so often, your self-worth. And then you start living with bated breath. You hold your breath because you focus so hard on not repeating that situation. I'm not wanting to get mom and dad that angry. I'm not wanting to get the people around me that mad again. Because I cause problems. And I'm told. I remember being at the side of a swimming pool. I've talked of this story before because it gets me so angry. My son used to swim butterfly, and butterfly is terribly taxing. When they've done a 200 meter, when you're 11 years old or 9 years old and you've been doing butterfly for 200 meters, you get out of that pool and you need a sugar rush right then. So they have their sweets on hand and they just pile them in because your sugar content is so low, you've expended all of your energy. But so this little girl gets out, and the water's freezing cold, and she's shaking, and she comes up to Dad, and Dad is this massive chap sitting next to me. And she comes up, and her whole body language says, I'm needing sugar right now, but I need for you to put your arm around me. And he doesn't do that. He gives us this lecture. I can't even remember what their stupid surname was, but obviously it's very special. But he says, we the whatever, we don't lose. He looks at her and says, we don't lose. You've lost today, and that's bad. You've done our name a disservice. You know, and I've got a hard time. All I want to do is to take him by his belt that isn't even covering his crack and just shove him headlong into that pool and say, show us how you do it. Show us how you swim. Because he has no idea what he's doing to that child right now. But he's burdening her with the shame and with the relationship with shame that should never have happened. What that child needs is a nurture. What that child needs is a father that says, you're so amazing. I can't even swim, my child. I'm afraid of the water. And you do it like this, and you top 5 every time. That's great. And your personal best keeps improving. I've been because that's what swimming parents do. They sit there watching the clock, and then we've got conversations about, are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And if you're not improving your time, why not? We have those kind of conversations. What are you doing differently? You must do your turns better, or whatever, or you've got to get your start, or maybe your nutrition is or maybe you need some rest, you must sleep more, whatever. There's a lot of coaching involved. But the point I'm making, there's never any need for any shaming. Never. And a lot of us come from situations where that's the only reality we know. Believers, I just want to keep you. C.S. warned me of this. He told me the stage is smaller because we made it higher. And it's like the Bible says, pride comes before a fall. Don't make the stage higher. You're going to fall. That's funny. I was going to say something so profound now. Before I almost died. I remember. I'm talking about the fact that I believe God wants to have this Joseph conversation with us. you and your coat and your intimacy with the Father and these amazing times of worship. We fill up stadiums and we have these times with Christ. And I've got a suspicion that if Christ were outside that stadium dressed like a street person, when we come out of having done the good Father thing for 3 hours, most of us won't notice him there. Because we're so like Joseph, we're so immersed in our love for the Father and our good feelings that we haven't really understood that this is meant to translate laterally. Love to my brother. And as far as Joseph's concerned, he really loves them, but not in a way that is meaningful to them. They don't feel it. They don't know it. And we're going to come there very soon, because Joseph doesn't understand what I'm talking about now. Joseph doesn't understand why they manifest the rage and where that rage comes from. Joseph doesn't understand shame because he's never experienced it. Toxic shame, secondly, evokes self-consciousness. When you're this baby and you're living with bated breath, you are more aware of yourself about what you do and don't do, and you've got your shoulders up all the time, and you scan your horizon fearfully because you're so afraid of making mistakes, because you have the suspicion that's growing, it's small still, that maybe you are a mistake. You know, many of us come from situations where parents, and you know, when you're 2.5, 3 years old, it's not like mom's going to come back and say, "Oh, I should never have said that. I should never have said you're a mistake. We would have been better off without you. We wouldn't have been under this financial pressure if it had not been for you. And all the needs you brought with you." But you know, it gets said. And it gets internalized. So we become aware of it when the brothers dump you down the pit, or the brothers are burning down the university, or they're wanting to wreck the country, or they're running rampant in North Carolina, they're wanting to kill every white person. That's when we become aware of it. And we don't understand what's going on. Or we sit in shock and horror when we hear stories about how Joseph's brothers just try to kill him, and then they sit down with their Kentucky Fried Chicken, and life goes on. And we're all horrified. What kind of people are these? Yeah, they're the majority of the world's population. For every one Joseph, there's 11 brothers who all share the same experience. And you can walk into that room when they're having those conversations, and you can say, "Well, I don't agree with that narrative. You guys are thinking about things the wrong way. Your perception and your perspective is skewed." Not for them. It's got to be right, because we all agreed about it. Because this is our experiential reality. This is how we experience it. This is how we experience Him. Shame evokes a certain self-consciousness. It's an assumption at the deepest part that you're not really redeemable. There's no salvation for you. Grandma would say it this way: "Daar's niks sal van jou te smeer nie." You're irredeemable. And psychotherapists call that experience, they've got an interesting term for it, they call it slavery. You become a slave to thoughts of interrogation. It's an incessant stream, and some people have, and it's not like you're delusional. It's called an inner critic. And some people have several inner critics. They're always checking on you as to your performance. How you doing? And they're quick to condemn you, accuse you, and to generate false guilt. So it manifests in intense self-scrutiny, but it's a very painful process, because it brings with it the dread of exposure. And you've heard it many times. You've heard shame speak many times. Mom says, tidy up, neaten yourself up. And you go, why? We're just walking to Auntie so-and-so's up the road. No. What are the people going to think when they see you like this? And you go like, I don't know what the people are going to think. I don't think I really care what the people are going to think. I just wanting to get to Auntie Rosie's. I want to get my skateboard. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to play on it. Mom says, no. You go back into the house right now and you tidy up. So you go back into the house and you tidy up. And it happened again. You at the receiving end of the voices that's speaking to Mom's head, and Mom thinks those voices are all the people living down the road that are going to be talking. But nobody's even going to notice you going to Auntie Rosie's house for the board. But you can't tell Mom that, because she's got these 10 voices in her head speaking to her all the time about what the people say. So when Romans 8 says that we are no longer slaves to fear, that's the fear. It's the fear of being shamed. That's the slavery that Scripture speaks about. It's not fear of the dark. It's not fear of the future, not fear of the past, not that kind of fear. It's the fear that speaks of a sense of social obligation. There's stuff that I must get right. There's stuff that I must do. That's called slavery. That's slavery. And it's all part of the shame dynamic. Are you still with me? But it's a dreadful pain. It makes one want to hide the flawed self from the world. And you're terrified that you found out. So, you know what little Johnny does? Little Johnny notices that when there are people around, when Auntie Joan comes over to the house, that Mom puts on another voice. It's not like Johnny has to go inside, put on other clothes. Mom also puts on another person. And that person, Johnny notices, happens when Mom's on the phone. Hello. Oh, how are you? So nice. Oh, life's just wonderful, wonderful. Shut up. No, it's just the dog. It's just the dog. And all I'm saying is our nurturers are modeling a struggle with shame that we internalize to it, and we understand that's normal. It's normal to have two personas. It's normal to have a proxy persona. It's normal to have an avatar. It's normal to have another person that leaves the house and you leave that other one that is really so shame-based and freaked out at home. That person doesn't go to work. The other one with a lipstick on and with the petite clothes, that one goes out and faces the world. But what happens in the internalized inner world of the little kid is that you know that you're going to have to get this thing right. You're going to have to develop somebody else that can deal with the world and speak with the world and be there for the cameras and smile. But that other person that better, you keep that hidden. That person comes out when we're alone together. That person comes out when we have family talks. That person's the one who lives at home. But the one who leaves the gate, who drives out in the car, once you've pressed that remote button and the garage door opens and the gate opens, once that gates and doors close, that's another person who goes out into the world. And when little Johnny arrives at the office and Mom comes walking out of the bank and greets everybody, and she comes to Johnny and she gives him a kiss and how are you, my love? She picks him up and gives a squeeze. I mean, there's nothing of the whole shame dynamic present there then. Johnny goes home and goes, my goodness. It would be so amazing if that mom came home sometimes. And if that mom loved me, and mom showed me that caring and respect that. So Johnny's no longer free to communicate his thoughts and his words in an open, honest manner. And Johnny adopts the belief. Johnny starts to believe that he's got to do like Mom. You've got to work hard to win respect. I've heard this in Christian circles so many times. You don't give your respect to other people, they must earn it. You don't give your trust to other people, they must earn it. Because there's a whole lot of attributes that are actually God's attributes that are being perverted in the world and we're not aware of it. And shame is just one of them. Has to do with God's holiness, but we'll come to that in just a moment. But it's like love. God's love has to do with fear, respect, and trust. Without those two legs, that love's going to keel over. It can't stand. But real love is all about respect, all about boundaries. I respect your boundaries, you respect my boundaries, then we can have a relationship and love can flow. Outside of that, there can't be love. There's a lot of abuse that happens. Can I have an amen? And there's got to be trust. I've got to be willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. I've got to do that, just up front. Otherwise, I don't love you. So when I come to God and I say, God, take my life, He knows I'm lying, but guess what? He gives me the benefit of the doubt. He knows, like we heard this morning, that take my life doesn't mean that you've got my money. It means that 20 years into the relationship, I must still go back to that conversation. Doesn't mean you've got my time or my energy or my vanity. Doesn't mean that. But God knows those conversations will come. But He gives us the benefit of the doubt up front. He trusts us. So He gives us all of His love, all of His Son, all of that stuff, just like that. He doesn't give you 75% of Himself until you qualify for more. He's not like the bank. I must go faster, otherwise we're not going to go home today. But a lot of people really believe that life is all about working to earn and gain an external source of validation. People telling you you're okay. Because you don't have that belief that you are okay internalized. You're governed by shame. You're a self-conscious person. And God wants one to come to a place where you're not self-conscious anymore, but self-aware. But we'll come there. It causes the victim to suffer relational dysfunction with others owing to a sense of smallness, worthlessness, powerlessness. And then the big one. Guilt or blame attribution lies at the end of that. Because you work for validation, you are always ready to defend your own sense of integrity. So if there's any questions as to who used up all the sugar at the office, your internalized instinct is, her. You're not even going to think about it, but you're going to do everything in your power to make sure that that conversation doesn't come to me. All of us do that. It's blame attribution has to do with how we work hard at managing our world to keep ourselves safe. And one can spend days and weeks working through this, but it comes down to this. Jesus said it this way. Why? Why, when you're dealing with somebody else, are you going to do it without getting a balanced view of blame attribution? Why is it that when there's something in your eye, you project it onto somebody else in terms of size? When it's in your eyes, it looks like a tree trunk. But then you look at somebody else saying, the tree trunk's in your eye. That's blame attribution. Untrue blame attribution. Instead of just asking somebody, can you help me to get this little thing out of my own eye? And it looks big, but it's small. But when it comes to dealing with the issue of who's responsible for things that go wrong, who's to blame, who's guilty, what happens when we are governed by shame is that you take out your microscope for somebody else's wrongdoing. And you dissect it and you analyze it and you make it internal. In other words, they are wrong, but they're very wrong. And they're wrong because there's actually something wrong with their character or their personality. It's something in them that causes them to do this. But if it's you, if you caught out for the sugar, then blame attribution becomes external. No, there really wasn't any sugar left, and there was just half a spoon. And I generally don't use sugar. I just thought I'd experiment with it for the morning because I'm actually on this Banting diet, you know. So it was just a slip. So your own issues, you take out your telescope and you place it in the horizon, and it becomes tiny. It's just something out there, and it's got nothing to do with me, and it's external. There are 10 reasons, circumstantial reasons why this happened. Are you guys still with me? This is a bit of a lecture. We're looking at toxic shame. Let's look at healthy shame. We've all seen it. She's 3 years old. She's got a spring dress on, and she's going to school. And now something happens, and she looks all awkward and coy and bashful, and then she blushes. It happens to white people. With the rest of us, you've got to watch our eyes, and you've got to be able to read this thing very, very carefully. But it happens to all of us. But that speaks of an innocence that we all are born with. And it's something that God has given to us because it's an experience that informs us when we make mistakes, because it's the window, it's the opportunity that God provides for us to grow. It's just that slight sense of imbalance that lets you know, okay, I've got to grow, I've got to learn something here. That's how natural shame works. It's just that little place where you get caught out. Unless when there's toxic shame, you cannot distinguish between embarrassment and humiliation. Every embarrassment. Look at today's kids. They talk about microaggressions. In other words, somebody looks at them like they're a lesbian when they're not a lesbian. And they decide that was a you're a lesbian look I got. And you can't tell them, no, I wasn't looking at you. You're not that pretty. I was looking past you. No, you looked at me, and even worse, you looked past me. You didn't see me. So I'm offended. Because that embarrassed me, that fact that you looked at me. And you've all had it in public. You're sitting in this bus or this train, and you're just looking around. Somebody's head snaps around, gives you that, who are you looking at look. And that's just natural. It's a healthy shame. No big deal with that. But it highlights our basic need for connection through relationship with others. It's the emotional, spiritual thrust needed for finding love and intimacy with others. Watch what Paul says in 2 Thessalonians. He says, if someone doesn't flow with us, with our vision at this time, note that person, and watch this. Don't keep company with him. Don't invite him to the bride. Don't have coffee with them. We need to restore a sense of healthy shame to him. And relationship is what keeps healthy shame alive. Fellowship is what keeps healthy shame alive. And we as a church, we don't understand that scripture will not get mentioned on any Christian television today because we don't get it. Because the whole idea that scripture says we've got to shame somebody, or when the Mennonites do their shaming, we don't get that at all. Because for us, it's all bad. Because we cannot distinguish. We're a generation that is so broken, so bruised, we can't distinguish between being embarrassed and just being humiliated. And Paul is not saying, go to war with them. He's saying, just withdraw from them for a little while so they can make up their minds, whether they're with us or not. And somebody pull them aside and say, listen, it's going to work like this for the next 6 months. We've noticed that you're not really wanting to flow with us, and we are really on a mission here. We're really serious about what God has called us to do, serious about our obedience, serious about our compliance. Are you on the same page with us? You're not on the same page? Okay, you think about it. We're going to give you some time out. It's not a war, it's just time out. And obviously, it's a moment for that guy, because now he's got, and it's what you do with your teenager when your teenagers discover tick. If there's a healthy shame, there's a good chance you're going to turn that teenager around, because you're going to tell the teenager, listen, as a family, no more pocket money, no more data, in fact, no more telephone, no fuel money, none of the cars are available to you. You're like grounded for 1,000 years. And Nobody talks to you. This has been such a challenge for me because we don't understand tough love. We don't understand tough anything today. That's why our kids are so messed. And our relationship with God's so messed. Because the worst thing God can do for us to say no. He's not allowed to say no. Nobody's allowed to say no. And that's the function of healthy shame. It's when we say no to somebody.